Welcome. This video is brand new to yoga. So I really appreciate that you chose Lizzie Brooks Yoga and Fitness to start your yoga journey. You have to be very brave in order to do that. There's a lot of misperceptions about what yoga is and how to do it, and right ways and wrong ways. This is going to be very casual. I hope that you, at the end of it, feel much more confident in exploring more with yoga. And please, in the comments, ask any questions that you have. And also, if you find value to it, like and subscribe. And go ahead and come join me on your mat. If you don't have a mat, you can use a non-sliding surface, which would be great, a little hard to find. But if you do have a mat, that would be preferable. All right, come on and join me. So I recommend that you grab a blanket or a towel or something to sit your hips up a little higher on. That generally feels better for most of us, to sit the hips higher than the knees, or at least the same height. So go ahead and grab that if you can. And I also want to just put out there that there are going to be things in your yoga lifetime that feel right and things that don't. And I want you to choose in that moment whether you come out of something or go deeper into something, depending on the messaging that you're getting in your own body. The teacher never knows more than you, ever. So with that said, let's be very kind to ourselves. This will not be a very long practice as I take you through this slow initiation, and I know that you will feel better having done it. So sit up nice and tall, close your eyes, and just come to your breath. Sometimes people think that yogis can just easily find their breath and meditate. No, we're just human. So it's just giving a little more focus to your breathing, the inhale and the exhale, and getting out of your own way a little bit through getting out of hypercritical words that you're saying to yourself or holdings. Release the shoulders. Relax your jaw, and let the lungs just do what they're meant to do, which is move freely on that breath. Take a slow inhale and sigh it out. And then from here, we're just going to send the head around. It could go in a full slow circle, or it can just kind of go through the midline and side to side. So you can go back and forth here, or you can send it all the way around. But don't send it all the way around if the back of your neck doesn't feel good when you do that. Easing out some of that tension that we all get built up. And then let your head hang down towards your heart, and one vertebra at a time, ease the head back over the shoulders. And when you get there, take a sigh again. The sigh just sends a message to the body to calm down. So use your blanket or your towel, take it onto your mat like so, or onto the floor, wherever you are, and put your knees forward. They can go wide or together, you choose, toes touching or close, and come down maybe to the forearms. This is a modified child's pose. It's meant to open the hips, the lumbar, and lengthen the spine a little bit. And if you feel like you can walk a little further forward with the arms, dropping the torso down and putting the head down on the ground, or maybe on a pillow, or even if you have a block or something, you can do that too. But right now, let's keep it really casual and just focus on the breath. And we'll rise up to an all fours position. So whenever you're here, you want to make sure that you're rooting your finger pads down a little bit, not clawing the mat, but just rooting down a little bit to give a little bit of a lift to the wrists, meaning the muscles around the wrists engage a little bit and you're not just kind of in the outer nerve bundles of the wrist. So root the fingertips down, root the first finger and thumb ball joint gently down. And instead of sagging here, let's lift the organs towards the spine and create more of a long spine. And draw a circle now. So it's not a perfect circle. It could be an ellipse. It could almost be a square, it doesn't really matter. We're just gonna rotate around. So our wrist joints, our knees, our hips, our shoulders are moving differently. And then the other direction. The knees less so because the knees are hinge joints and they're not gonna get quite as much as, say, the shoulders or the hips. And then pause in center. Let's find our spines. Root down into the hands and knees, round your spine and open right behind the heart. So we're really getting that stretch right at that thoracic spine, right behind the heart. And then as you take it the opposite direction, unfurl, don't be in a hurry, and reach the heart forward and the hips up. And we'll do that just one more time, rounding here, opening. This puts some nice pressure in different places on the discs in between the spinal bones and then other direction. And it gives them a nice squish in both directions, which is good for those discs. And come back to center, and now we'll wag the hips slowly side to side to squish a little bit differently. So those discs need to have nutrition and waste coming and going. So nutrition coming in, waste going out, and moving the spine helps the discs to do that. Tuck your toes under. I'll take you into what's called a downward facing dog. You've probably heard of it. I don't want you to think that your heels have to go to the floor. In fact, you might walk the feet close enough that your knees can bend, your heels are a little bit lifted or even a lot lifted, and you're just feeling that the hips are far enough back that the spine gets length and the back of the legs feel like they're getting a stretch. Breathe here and use this as an opportunity to soften the neck down. You can even move the head around a little bit. So downward dog doesn't have to be heels rooting to the floor. Please remember that always. Deep breath in. Exhale, slowly lower back down to your all fours position. From here, we'll go into that back bend that you were in prior, where you're gonna drape your belly down, heart forward, hips up. We'll go back into that rounding position. Inhale into a neutral spine. And if you have a couple of blocks or books or anything, that's useful here, but you don't need them. You can just put your fingertips to the ground. I'll show you what it's gonna look like with the blocks. Step your right foot forward. Your fingertips can be here if you don't have the blocks, down on the floor, or some other things that you can build up for height. We're gonna allow the back toes to tuck if that's okay for the toes. If it's not okay, top of the foot down. So allow your pelvis to come forward until you feel some spaciousness to the front of your left hip. And then root what's touching the floor. So root down into it and grow like you're growing from those roots up any amount. Shoulder blades draw back. And I don't want you to lift the chin here and collapse at the back of the neck. So just breathe. I think sometimes the hardest part of yoga is just reminding yourself to breathe. And we're gonna shift this one back. So the attention is gonna go from the front of the left hip to the back of the right leg. So you can move those blocks back or anything you have there if you're using it, or just fingertips. The back of your right heel is down. The toes, spread them out. It's not something we generally do very often, but it's really good for the whole body, arch of the foot and toes. Breathe here. Take your right hip, draw it back a little bit, and breathe. You can come way far away from the leg and see how that increases the stretch, or you can draw a little more forward and see how that increases the stretch. It's all up to what feels right to you. All of yoga is. Again, don't listen to the teacher if something doesn't feel right. You just come out of it, ask a question if you're in a public class, or maybe look it up, or you can always pop it in the comments to me. Sole of the foot comes down. We're coming back into that first position. Take the pelvis forward, root the floor, and lift up a little bit. This time, if you want to take your hands onto that front thigh, you can. And you can play with drawing the torso more forward or a little further back and see how that feeds that stretch, maybe even into the quads. Inhale and exhale. Bring the hands back to the floor or the blocks, maybe fingertips. Draw your right knee back. We'll come into that child's pose or downward dog. So you always have options. You should choose classes that give you options. Whether you're taking the child's pose here or that downward facing dog, not forcing through the hamstrings here. If you have knee issues and going into a child's pose is too much, you're gonna roll a towel or a blanket right behind the knees to prevent you from sitting back in such an acute angle on your knees. So that's a little bit of just a technique when you want to not go into such a smushed knee position. Lower if you're in downward dog to your all fours position. Rise up if you're in child's pose to all fours. If you're using your, what are these called? Blocks, take them forward. It's been a long day. And we'll step the left foot forward. Drawing roots to the floor, tuck the back toes if you can, if not, top of the foot down. One's not better than the other. I'm just going for a little bit different technique in the knee. Root down and lengthen forward. Breathe as if you're painting the front of your right hip with your breath. Maybe shoulders roll back a little bit more. And then we'll exhale, shift back, move your blocks if you have them, spread the toes and breathe here. Again, you can come high away for a stretch or a little closer or somewhere in between. So it's kind of like Goldilocks. You gotta find that just right stretch. There's so many different types of yoga, styles of yoga, movements in yoga. This is just to get your body a little more limber today and a little more focused on the breath, and I think you'll feel better. We all feel better after doing this kind of stuff, taking care of ourselves. We'll go back into that first position, pelvis forward, and then you have the option to come up to that front thigh, maybe shifting a little back or a little forward, and seeing how that just feels through the pelvis, through the legs, the low back. Inhale and exhale, hands come down to the floor or your blocks, move the knee back. And once again, you're an old pro at this now. You know what's next, child's pose or downward facing dog. Maybe shake the head out a little bit here. This is an opportunity to let some of the clutter of the mind descend down and to reboot the system a little bit. We'll come into an all fours position here, and we'll come into a turning the fingers back. This is really awkward. It should feel awkward. If it feels awkward, you're doing it right. Fingers turn back, heels of the hands away, breathe here. If you bring your shoulders right over the wrists, you'll feel a stretch. If you bring the hips back, you'll probably increase that stretch. So go according to what you need. We really work the undersides of our forearms by carrying things and working like this. We don't often stretch the underside of the forearms. Deep breath in, exhale. Then turn the fingertips back forward. Tuck your toes, go into your downward dog, and bend the knees any amount, maybe a whole lot, to walk your hands back. You can move any props out of the way. And then we're gonna come into a chair pose from the floor up. So feet are about hips distance apart or a little wider. Bend the knees, bring your hands onto the thighs. Hinge at the hips, shift the hips back. Start working the legs, larger muscle groups, really working here. And then we'll come all the way up. You can reach up or not reach up. We're gonna straighten the legs, torso rises, and bring the hands back to the heart center. Deep breath in, and shake it out. So this mudra, this is bringing the hands to the heart. That's called Anjali Mudra. It's or prayer pose. You might hear people say namaste, meaning the light of my heart honors the light of your heart. All of that is true right now, and I could go on and on, but I won't, all right? So let's go into a wider stance. And I don't want you to go so wide that you feel like you don't have that structure beneath you. So wider than the hips for sure, and you'll feel this out. Bring your hands to your waist and just draw a circle with your hips. So this is good for a lot of reasons, and it's not something we do very often. And then switch directions, which is kind of true with all of yoga. We don't do these shapes very often unless we have a consistent yoga practice. So it feels unfamiliar, and that's okay. Unfamiliar isn't necessarily bad. So I'm gonna take you into what's called a triangle pose. So you're gonna turn your left toes out. That heel is gonna sort of bisect your back arch. And then you might even wanna put a little bend in the knees so you don't hyperextend. And we're just going to take our lengthened waistlines and just reach the crown of the head towards those toes, those left toes. And you can stay here. When you can't kind of go laterally anymore, go ahead and put your hand down to the leg or a block. Other arm can come up and breathe here. So this is one of the most awkward postures, I think, in yoga for beginners. I know it definitely was for me. It didn't resemble anything I'd really done, not a lunge, anything like that. But it really got to an area of stretch, right? The leg, the top of the hip, that other shapes I was making with other workouts weren't getting to. Breathing here. And then inhale, come all the way up. You want to be careful in the transitions. We're just going to go directly to the other side, keeping it a little more simple today. Heel to arch, hands to waist. Reach laterally, tailbone towards that back heel more so, crown of the head towards the front toes. And you might feel a little pop like I just did. Lower hand comes down, upper arm can go up. The hand can stay on the waist too. The other thing I want to talk about is the neck. So you don't have to turn your gaze all the way up and stress the neck. If it feels better to look down or horizontal, do that. Breathing here, rooting the feet, making sure you're not gripping the toes on the mat. Just breathing. If you're ever wondering what you should be doing in a posture, breathe. And then press into the floor, inhale, come all the way up. Let's float the arms down, turn the toes forward, roll the shoulders back and down a few times. We're gonna come into a high lunge. So we'll just go into the opposite side, taking the front knee, bending it. You can bring the hands back to the waist. Now this back leg can be close in towards you or a little further back, but maybe not the knee so much passing the ankle, but attempting to make it a little more above the front ankle or even behind. Breathing here. If it feels great to reach up, let's go ahead and reach up. We'll add a little bit of movement in the arms. Inhale, exhale, bring your hands to your heart. Inhale, sweep the arms out and up. Exhale, hands through to the heart center. One more time, and it is a balance. Inhale, reach. And exhale, hands to the heart. Good, go ahead and turn back into that wide stance and shake it out. I want to definitely make sure that I say on this next side that you're not foot behind foot, but rather on train tracks. So that's gonna help with your balance. All right, so we'll go ahead and take ourselves into that lunge. Does the low back feel okay? You're not overreaching or over tucking, it's in between. If it feels okay to reach up and breathe here. Then we'll bring our hands to the heart and we'll add some movement, opening a little bit more through the shoulders. Inhale, reach out and up. And exhale, hands through to the heart. Let's do that again. Inhale, reach. Exhale, hands in front of the heart. One more time. Inhale. And exhale. All right, shake out the shoulders and we'll face back forward. From here, heel toe in, or you could take a little hop, but anytime you hop, do land with bent knees. Hopping is really good to build bone, remineralize the bones, and the lymphatic system. Really good to kind of move that around. And we'll just come into a little balance, which is gonna be a little funny because it doesn't seem like much of a balance, but it is. Bring the ball joints of your feet together and your heels slightly apart. Bring your hands to your heart and breathe. If you'd rather bring your hands to your waist or down, that's fine too. So there's an element of balance when we take our feet together underneath us versus separated. You never have to take your feet all the way together in yoga, okay? Unless you're doing a specific pose like this. But you can always come wider if balance doesn't allow, even now. And then if you want a little bit more, lift your heels up just a little bit. This might feel a little tricky. It's not something we do very often. And you might go a little higher. And if that's working, maybe you'll reach your arms up. Working in that balance, so good for your brain, so good for ankles, arches, toes, calf muscles, all the way through the hamstrings. And slowly bring your hands to your heart, lower your heels. Deep breath in, and just shake off your clutter. Get real casual, widen the stance. Shake out the knees a little bit here, And we'll go back into the neck. So any rotation, anything, sometimes when we're focused on balance, we kind of stiffen up. Let that go. And that's all the standing work we're going to do today. So come on down onto your all fours position, and I invite you to bring back some padding under the knees. We'll work the core a little bit and also work some asymmetry, which we do in yoga. Again, really good for the brain and the body. So reach your right arm forward. You can stay here and only do this, or you can reach your left leg back. You're engaging through the quads of that left leg. You're making sure that you're active there. Conversely, you could put the toes on the floor. Inhale here. Exhale, maybe take the elbow towards the knee. This is pretty advanced. Inhale, reach it out. So you can always just skip it or just hold as I go in and out. Maybe you're just holding the arm up, or maybe just the leg up or back, or maybe you're just kind of falling a little bit and resetting. Now we'll switch sides. Left arm forward. You can stay with that. Right leg back or on the floor. And then either static hold while using your breath, or in and out, rounding and extending. Focus. And again, if you teeter out of it, just kind of find the floor and come back into it. Yoga is not perfection. Boy, oh boy. People tend to think that. No, no, it is not. In fact, it's really good to try to use yoga to get over that idea that you need to be perfect. And we'll lower it down. This is the last option where you'll choose either that downward dog here or that child's pose, maybe modified here, or rolling that towel or another towel behind the knees, breathing. And if you're in that downward dog, go ahead and come into this position. If this position doesn't work, come into any seated position that does. Find something that works. So just be willing to toss out what someone has offered and toss in what feels better for you. That's very yogic. And then we'll all join in a seated position. Again, like we started, maybe adding some height under your sitting bones and recalibrating through your breathing. A lot of times when we're newer to yoga, and even with people who aren't, I see people, when I say sit up tall, they kind of are like this, very rigid, very much in a back bend. So this isn't exactly sitting up tall. This is splaying the front and contracting the back. So we have neutral curves in our spine that we want to keep intact. Lengthen up through those, find lengthen side body, front body, back body, soften the shoulder blades, soften the jaw, and don't overwork. So you can find length without hardening and overworking. And maybe this pose seems difficult too, because how often do we come to seated on the floor unless we do yoga a lot, right? Or sit around and play with our kids. So that's okay. It's okay for these things to feel odd. It's natural. We're going to move our lungs gently, inhale and exhale, and just bring some focus to that. And I'm going to ask that you invite a word that you'd like to bring in and out. So that could be harmony or health or calm, whatever it is. I know it seems a little woo-woo, a little silly, a little like a tree-hugging hippie, but science shows, I'm very science-based, and science shows that bringing these words in, focusing on the breath, actually changes your brain chemistry, your body chemistry, and makes you more apt to heal. So you're moving away from fight or flight and into those healing reserves, and that's what we want, right? And we have the power to do it. It's just sometimes hard to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. But look at you, you're doing it. So use your word. Find yourself smoothing out through the breathing, inviting that word in and out. And with that, we will shift directly down. We're not going to do any more seated postures. We're going to keep it real simple and come down to the floor and hug the knees in. So create a little ball here without lifting the head and shoulders, and rock a little side to side. Hands could just come to the knees here. You might circle the knees around. This is good for digestion and elimination. You can go the other direction, and also for hip health and low back health. I have another video that I will link, yoga for people who sit a lot. That one is really, really good. There is going to be more strengthening in there as well, but a lot of us sit a lot, so I think it's a really good one to do. You might check that one out. Soles of the feet down, breathe here. And now we'll just take the right knee in and extend the left leg onto the ground. If extending the left leg onto the ground doesn't feel good, just keep that knee bent. Breathe here, stretch. Find the opposition of drawing the right knee in and the left heel away. And then we'll just switch sides. Left knee in, right heel away. And then both knees back in. Rock a little side to side. And what's next is called Shavasana. It's final relaxation pose. You just lay however's comfortable. I always love to use a bolster or a blanket underneath the legs or the knees. You can roll that up if that feels better. Or of course you could come to seated if that's better. Something calming, something relaxing, where you, at the end of your yoga practice, you take a few moments to marinate on what you did and calm the nervous system even further. So if we want to heal, it doesn't just mean what we're doing, it's what we're not doing, it's the undoing. So stay in your comfortable resting pose, and let me just talk you a little bit through the importance of this. So if we're going and doing and creating, that's wonderful, but sometimes we get burnt out. The people who I know in my life who are the healthiest, the most calm, the most balanced, they take time to rest. They take time to, smell the roses. Again, it's something that I don't think we celebrate that part. We celebrate the effort and not the ease. But without the ease, we're not connected. So how do you want to spend your life? Please make time for the ease, make time for the rest, make time for yourself. I am going to link a couple more videos, the meditation for the first time, and also the breathing to feel calm. So I think those, if you are newer to yoga, will also be really, really helpful, and those might be next steps. Thank you so much for being here. Rest as long as you possibly can. Write anything that you need in the comments, and I am so happy that you chose Lizzie Brooks Yoga and Fitness. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.